The people who forget names the fastest are often the ones paying the most attention. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll never look at a forgotten name the same way again. Picture this: you meet someone, they tell you their name, you shake their hand, you nod confidently, and almost immediately, your attention goes somewhere else. You're wondering what to say next. Meanwhile, their name passes through your mind for a fraction of a second, then it's gone. 5 minutes later, you're still talking. You know where they're from. You remember the joke they made. You could picture exactly what they were wearing. But if someone asked for their name, your mind goes completely blank. The problem isn't that you forgot everything about the person. You remembered plenty. You just lost the one thing you assumed should have been easiest to remember. Maybe that's happened to you more times than you'd like to admit. And what's about to make sense might surprise you. Most people assume this is a memory problem. It isn't. Psychologists call the real culprit encoding. Before a memory can be remembered later, it first has to be encoded. In simple terms, the brain has to decide, is this worth paying attention to? And that decision happens incredibly fast, sometimes within seconds. If your attention is divided, the memory starts weak from the beginning, which means the problem isn't always remembering the name later. Sometimes the problem is that the name was never properly stored in the first place. Your brain is constantly filtering information. Every second, it receives far more than it could ever remember. The sound of the room, the color of the walls, the dozens of faces you pass every day. Most of it gets discarded because remembering everything would be impossible. So, the brain acts like a filter. And when you first meet someone, a name often looks like just another piece of information competing for attention. Try this for a second. Think about the last name you forgot. Got it? Now ask yourself, what were you actually thinking about in that exact moment? Because the answer is rarely nothing. You were probably wondering how you were coming across, or what to say next. And this reveals something unusual about names. Most information explains itself. If someone tells you they're a doctor, your mind starts building connections. A hospital, patients, years of training. The word means something. The same thing happens if I say they're a musician or a teacher or the tall guy with the beard standing near the door. But a name doesn't explain anything. It identifies a person without describing them. Michael could be anyone. Sarah could be anyone. It's just a sound, a label, a piece of information with no story attached to it yet. This is also why people often remember faces far better than names. You might walk into a store and instantly recognize someone you met months ago, yet have no idea what they're called. That's because a face gives the brain a huge amount of information. Expressions, features, age, emotion. A name doesn't. It's simply attached to the person, which means remembering a name often requires an extra mental step that recognizing a face does not. And here's the part most people never notice. It's not that your memory failed, it's that the name never properly landed, like someone tossing you a ball while you were looking in another direction. Technically, it reached you, but you never actually caught it, because in a very real sense, you didn't have it in the first place. The introduction happened, the sound was heard, but your attention was busy somewhere else, and memory can only keep what attention first allows in. Ironically, common names can sometimes be harder to remember than unusual ones. If you meet someone with a rare name, your brain notices the novelty. But if you've met 20 different Michaels throughout your life, a new Michael doesn't necessarily feel distinctive. The brain pays attention to what stands apart from the crowd. Now, think about the opposite experience. There are names you haven't heard in years, yet you could recall them instantly. The name of your first crush, the teacher who believed in you, the friend who got you into trouble, the person who broke your heart. You didn't sit down and memorize those names. You probably weren't even trying to remember them, but they're still there, clear as ever. Why? Because at some point, the name stopped being just a name. It became attached to a feeling, a story. Maybe they made you laugh so hard you couldn't breathe. Maybe they embarrassed you in front of a room full of people. Maybe one conversation with them changed the direction of your life. And once that happened, the name was no longer a random label. It became a shortcut to an entire experience. The moment gained emotional weight, and suddenly, the name became almost impossible to forget. So here's the real question. It's not why you forget names, it's what you were paying attention to instead. And emotion plays a bigger role than most people realize. Think about the names you remember most clearly. They're often connected to moments that made you feel something. Excitement, embarrassment, love, loss. Emotion acts like a signal to the brain, a way of saying, this matters, pay attention, remember this. Which is why emotionally significant people often become unforgettable, even when years have passed. This is also why nervous people in social situations forget names even faster, not because they're less intelligent, not because they have worse memories, because anxiety consumes attention. Part of the mind becomes focused on self-monitoring. How am I doing? What should I say next? Do I seem awkward? And every bit of attention spent on those questions is attention that isn't being spent on the name. By the time that mental chatter quiets down, the name is already gone. The irony is that forgetting names isn't always a sign that you're not paying attention. Sometimes, it's a sign that you're paying attention to too many things at the same time. So here's the truth. Forgetting names isn't usually a memory problem. It's an attention problem. And sometimes it's a sign that your attention was already spent on something you quietly considered more important than the person standing in front of you. Most people imagine memory like a filing cabinet. Information goes in, information gets stored, and if we can't find it later, we assume it must have been lost. But that's often not what happened at all. Think back to that introduction. The moment someone tells you their name, are you fully focused on the name itself? Usually not. You're thinking about what to say next, wondering how you're coming across, trying to keep the conversation moving. Your attention is everywhere except the one thing you're trying to remember. So, the name arrives, but never really lands. And that's why it can feel so strange afterward. You don't feel like you've forgotten the name. You feel like you never properly had it in the first place, because in a very real sense, you didn't. Memory doesn't work like a recording. Each time we remember something, we're actually reconstructing it, piecing together fragments, details, associations, which means memories with more connections are usually easier to rebuild later, and names that never formed those connections often disappear first. Now think about what happens when someone gradually becomes important in your life. At first, they're just another face, another introduction, another name you might struggle to remember. But then something changes. You have a conversation you'll never forget. You share a laugh, a difficult moment, an inside joke, a memory, and little by little, that person stops being a stranger. The name starts collecting meaning. It becomes connected to experiences, stories, emotions, entire chapters of your life. Eventually, hearing their name doesn't bring a single piece of information to mind. It brings a whole person, their voice, their personality, the memories you share, the way they made you feel. A face becomes a person, and a person becomes impossible to separate from their name. In other words, memory isn't built from information alone. It's built from meaning. And if attention decides what your brain keeps, it raises a much bigger question. What else are you forgetting without ever realizing you chose to? If this made something click, that's exactly what this channel is for.